So, hello and welcome back. Today, we want to look at the consumer markets. We want to discuss consumer markets and consumer behavior. And our objectives are to define consumer markets and identify their types, describe the consumer buying decision-making process, and then finally analyze the psychological, the social, personal, and cultural factors that influence consumer behavior. Okay, so if we say consumer markets, I think we have mentioned this earlier. Consumer markets are made up of individuals and households who buy goods and services for personal use. Okay, so once the one making the purchase is also the end user, or he's the same person who's going to make use of that product or that service, then we refer to that individual, or we refer to that household as a consumer. Okay, so we can have the goods market where we refer to tangible products like clothing, all right, electronics, furniture, or we can have the service market where you refer to those who purchase intangible offerings like the provision of education, provision of health care, right? All of those are people who patronize the the intangible offerings. So we refer to those as the services market. Then in recent times, you have the digital markets where you have those who are going to be making purchases through online platforms, right? So all consumers are not the same. Every consumer may not necessarily behave the same way as your previous consumer. So if you have had 5 people buying from you and making use of your product, you don't expect all 5 people to behave the same way. Okay. So the same way that all consumers are unique, they also exhibit different behavior when they are making a purchase or when they are making a purchase decision. And the behavior is influenced by several factors. Okay, so the purchasing decision is influenced by several factors, and these factors are what will inform the kind of behavior that a particular consumer will put up. It is therefore important to understand the various factors which influence consumer behavior. Okay, so before any consumer will make a purchase, they would have, number one, identified a need. Okay, that is what you refer to as the problem recognition. They would have identified a need in their lives. Okay, and so they would want a solution to that need, or they would want to meet that need. Then it will take us to the next stage of the process, which is information search. So based on the need that has been identified, that consumer will seek solutions. All right. And in seeking solutions, they are going to evaluate alternatives. Of course, no one walks to the market and pick the first product they see. They would go through alternatives and check which of the alternatives will best suit their need or will best solve their problem. Okay, so they go out there and compare options. That is the evaluation of alternatives. Then, based on the options that they are able to evaluate, they make a choice. So they make a choice on the product or service that will best suit their need. And that is where the purchasing decision is made. Okay, so once that consumer buys the product or makes use of the service, their satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the product or service is what you refer to as the post-purchase behavior. Okay, so the process consumers go through when purchasing products or services is one, the problem recognition, then the information search, which is followed by evaluation of alternatives, the purchase decision, and then the post-purchase behavior. So before a consumer decides to make a purchase, they would have already gone through the first three stages before they finally make the decision to buy the product. And when they buy the product, it doesn't end there. Whether or not they are satisfied with the product will determine what happens next. Okay. So several factors affect the consumer's behavior when they want to make a purchase. And the factors can be psychological, can be social, can be cultural, can be personal, or economic. All right. If we want to look at the factors, okay, we want to evaluate the factors. If we pick the psychological factors, they basically refer to how the consumer thinks. So the consumer's motivation, their perception, beliefs, and attitudes about the purchase they want to make or about the need they have identified. So the psychological factors focus on the motivation, all right? What drives the consumer to take action? So this will take us to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We would discuss this in detail later, but you notice that for every consumer, depending on the level they are at on the hierarchy of needs, their focus will be different. Okay, so what we say here is that the motive or the need or the level of the consumer on Maslow's hierarchy of needs will determine how or what exactly they will look out for on the market. All right. The second is perception, where the consumer, you want to look at how the consumer interprets information. So if, for example, there's an advert on the screens, on TV, on social media, how does the consumer interpret this information? Okay, so based on how the consumer interprets this information, they can form some attitudes or they can come up with beliefs or they can come up with how they think about the product. Okay, and this informs the psychological factors that affect their behavior. There's also the issue of what the consumer beliefs and their attitudes, the consumer beliefs and his attitudes. Okay, so these factors influence the preferences and the loyalty of the consumer. So, for example, if a consumer believes that a particular product will make them happy or will make them look a particular way and they like the idea, then they are going to be loyal to your brand and they are going to buy it. On the same way, in the same way, if they believe that the product is going to serve them in a way that is not what they expect or in a way that they are not happy with, then of course they will not be loyal to a particular brand. So the psychological factors refer to the motivation, the perception, beliefs, and attitudes of your consumer. Then you have the social factors. The social factors is where you consider family, the social roles and groups, and then the reference groups. So you want to look at the family of your consumer. Okay, you may want to consider the parents' impact on that consumer's life, right? What the people close to that consumer think about your product. All right. So if he stays with his parents or if she stays with her parents, what are her parents' thoughts about your product? What are her parents' thoughts about the services that you are providing? Okay. So based on this, if the family of your consumer are such that they align with your product, then of course it will affect the purchase positively. But if they don't like your product, then it will also affect the purchase negatively. Okay, your consumers' friends, okay, there's what you call the peer pressure. A lot of people fall for peer pressure. So if the friends, the close friends of your consumer are such that they like your product or they patronize your product, then the possibility of this consumer buying from you is high. Okay, so the social role and the group that your consumer finds him or herself in is very important. Her colleagues at work, his colleagues at work, his supervisor, or people who work under him or her, what do they say about your product? Okay, then you may also want to consider some external people, call them the reference groups, like opinion leaders in the community, influencers of particular products. You have brand ambassadors. What are the perceptions that these people have made on the consumers on the consumer's mind, okay? So that if the impression is positive from these reference groups, or if the testimonies that your consumer is hearing are positive, then it means that it will influence the purchase decision positively. Then you also have personal factors, all right? Issues about how old your consumer is, your consumer's age, right? The life cycle stage he finds him or herself in, right? Is the person a student? Is the person a worker? Is the person a retiree? Or someone who is in between, so maybe was previously employed and now for some reason is not employed. These are personal factors that can affect whether or not that consumer makes a purchase, okay? Then you may also want to consider the lifestyle. The lifestyle is also personal factors that can affect the behavior of your consumer. So how does this person live? What is their lifestyle? What activities do they enjoy? What are their interests? All right. What opinions do they hold about certain issues? All right. So based on these lifestyle matters, they would have a particular behavior as consumers. You may also want to check the kind of work they do, the kind of people they relate with, how much salary they bring home at the end of the month. All right. All of these are personal factors that will affect the purchasing behavior of your consumer. Then you have cultural factors. Okay. This we call you will consider the culture, right? The subculture, and then the trends in culture. So you may want to consider the shared values, the traditions, okay, that influence the preference of your consumer. Where did your consumer grow up? What are some of the values that they hold dear to themselves? These will influence whether or not they make a purchase, okay? Then you may also want to consider subgroups or some groups within the culture where your consumer grew up, right? So you may want to consider some youth groups, all right, or groups that are in the community but are not generally from so they are from the community, but that's a subset of the community, right? So you can have the youth, maybe women, aged women above 40, or maybe widowed women, some groups within the particular culture, right? So that is also important because the shared values of some of these subcultures influence consumers from those groups. All right. Then you have modern trends in culture like globalization, you have the cultural convergence, and the issue of preservation or sustainability. All right. So if these are such that your consumer holds them dear, then they are going to form part of the factors which will influence its behavior or on whether to make a purchase or not, and how to even make the purchase. Then you also have the economic factors. The economic factors, you consider the personal income of your consumer, right? It's also important to consider the discretionary income. This refers to what is available to your consumer after the taxes and all of those, maybe rent, the bills for the month, school fees, all of those are taken out of the income of your consumer. Then we call the rest the discretionary income. Okay. So this will determine how much the consumer has to make other purchases. So if your product falls within if your product falls under this line where it's only the discretionary income that can be used to make a purchase, then it means that the discretionary income should be enough to make a purchase. Otherwise, the consumer will not make a purchase. So the discretionary income is also very important and influences how the consumer behaves. All right. Then you also have the disposable income, which refers to the income available with the consumer to spend according to his wishes. Right. So maybe you want to, if the consumer has to go to the spa, right? Or wants to have a birthday party, this will come from the disposable income. So the disposable income will inform or would specify how this consumer will behave when he's faced with those kind of situations, maybe to have a party or to go for a program on a weekend, all right? Then you also have the family income. You notice that if the responsibilities of the consumer are high, and so the family is spending more on important things, then what it means is that they are not likely to make purchases if they are what they have for surplus is not enough. Okay, so if everything has been exhausted, then there's very little to make use of for other things. So depending on the family and how affluent the family is, they may consider the purchase of some things and will not even think about purchasing other things. Okay, so lower income families have less demand than prosperous families. Why? Because there isn't even enough funds to handle those costs. Okay. Then you also have the consumer's expectations regarding future income. Does this consumer want to save for the future? Right? How much liquid assets does the consumer have? In a case where they want to make a purchase, they will think about it. What's their level of credit? All right. What is the standard of living? All of these will influence the purchasing decision of your consumer, and it will influence how they finally behave or how they go about the purchase. Okay, so consumer decisions are influenced by several factors. We have the psychological factors, the social factors, the personal factors, the economic factors, the cultural factors, the economic factors. And it is important that as a marketer, it's important that as someone who wants to understand the intricacies of marketing, that you get to know what informs the behavior of your consumer. And these are the factors which inform the behavior of your consumer. Okay. All right. So what we are to do in our various groups, one of you, right, will think about a recent purchase that you made. Okay, so a significant one, of course, that you made. What you are to do is to think about it. Think about why you bought it or why you made use of the service. Who influenced you to make use of the service, or what influenced you to make use of the service? What you considered before making that purchase decision. All right. And then you tell us you tell us what motivated your purchase. All right. And then the factors you considered before you made the purchase. You will tell us if you were satisfied or not with the purchase, why you were satisfied or why you were not satisfied with the purchase. Okay. And you also tell us how you will link your experience to the PESTEL framework and decision-making process. Okay, so earlier on, we looked at how the PESTEL framework can affect marketing. Okay, so you would make use of this, of your decision to make a purchase and how it aligns with the PESTEL framework. You can make use of any of the factors, and then we'll discuss this in class. Let me know if you have any questions. You can just drop them on the page and we would answer them. Let's meet in class to discuss this in detail. Thank you all very much, and I'll see you soon.